Hello, everybody. Welcome to Subtle Asian Book Club. We're a book club amplifying Asian stories. And I'm Alexandra, one of the co-hosts. And I'm here with my Tiffany, which is my other co-host. And we're here with Deepti Kapoor, who is the author of Age of Vice, which was our February 2023 book of the month. As a quick icebreaker, Deepti, can you please introduce yourself and your book, as well as your favorite book from 2022?
Well, I'm Deepti and I am a novelist. I wrote Age of Vice. I live in Lisbon, Portugal at the moment, though I have lived in India for most of my life. So I just moved here a few years back. And I guess most people have already read Age of Vice if it's your February book club pick. So I'm going to be extremely, and I don't like to I hate saying what my novel is about. I'm sure you get that a lot from novelists. However, I did read an extremely cool tweet a couple of days back, which I thought was a very succinct way of describing Age of Vice. It just said, Age of Vice is a novel about crime and wealth told in a masala, stop bracket, not in a pejorative way, end bracket, novel. It's told in a masala way. So I would basically say, and I thought, okay, that's basically it. It's a novel about wealth, crime. I will add politics and power and abuse of power, set in northern India, and it's told in an entertaining and masala way.
That's so exciting. For those of us who may not be super familiar with the term, can you explain a little bit more about what does it mean for a book to be written in a masala way?
Oh, okay. Masala, as you know, masala means spices. So, and in India, we have, when we cook mostly anything, you always have a spice mix, right? So you'll have your basic spices, which will cover everything from like turmeric to, now I'm going to use the Hindi words because I never know the English ones, zira to, to hing, to mirchi, which is red chili powder. So basically, Age of Vice is also a novel which combines action, intrigue, mystery, suspense. Even I would say a little bit of comedy, though I think it skews to the serious side. So it combines all of this in this kind of way where you're telling a serious story, but in an entertaining, thrilling way.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect way to describe it. There's just so much going on. In a way, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint I don't want to say what genre it is and it's about, because there's just so many pieces that are coming together to tell this one succinct story. But diving into some of the questions, what was the research process like as you were writing this book? Was there something that was really difficult about it? And what was the most rewarding? And if you went on any fun research trips, was there anything that you discovered or any fun discoveries you had as you were going through the books or online forums?
So I don't actually have, I've noticed I don't actually do research with the purpose that I'm going to find out something about X and then I go and find out about X. All my research for Age of Vice was very unstructured. It was basically I lived for since I was a journalist in my 20s till now. I lived in a certain way. I met people. I collected stories. I listened to people's stories, and then I combined all of that in the novel. And so the research is often a lot of unstructured travel and going to places, not because of any particular reason, but because maybe someone has told you that there is a person you should go and meet in this particular village in the Himalayas or the mountains, and then you just go off, which is what I would do with my husband, and then you collect stories along the way, and you meet people, and a lot of times the interesting stories and the people that you've met find their way in the novel, and of course in different ways. Then once that character is introduced, I go off and add things, and it changes along the way, and then they become there's so the research isn't really like there was at least now as I try and start to research book 2 and 3, I realize that trying to do this very specific research feels to me very sterile. So that's what has worked for me in the past.
What has been like one of your favorite conversations that maybe was very unexpected that you just stumbled upon, or someone told you to meet a certain person?
Well, I think meeting the inspiration for the character of Ajay was something that was very unexpected, but really broke open the novel for me, because Ajay is the first character that everyone is introduced to. He is the hero, I suppose, even as we pivot to other characters later. I was traveling again in the mountains, and my husband and I were doing not book reviews, I think hotel reviews. We were reviewing hotels, boutique hotels and guest houses for like a tiny website, nothing very fancy. But it allowed us to basically, go to different places and say, oh, we're doing hotel reviews. Can we stay here? And they'd be like, okay. And then we take photos and write about it. And someone told us to go to this small place in the Himalayas. And we went there and we met this young boy who was working in this guest house. And he had this, story of loss. He'd been sent away to work for to pay off some family debts. And, he was just full of hope and love and joy. And, that was basically when my writer's brain started to click. And I had been, till then, kind of had an idea for what I wanted to do with the novel, but I didn't have Ajay. And once I had the character of Ajay, it really broke open. So that was, I suppose, that moment.
Wow. That's so inspiring and so exciting. And you mentioned like just now about your extensive experience as a journalist. How would you say that those experiences shaped your writing specifically and your storytelling? And how was that process of translating your experiences into like written word?
Well, I think again, I was a journalist in my 20s. I don't think I was I was a very good journalist, but what it did do is that I was a very shy person, and journalism gave me, I suppose, the tools to be able to walk up to strangers and ask them questions, because that's what I had to do for a long time when I was working as an intern for newspapers in Delhi. So that helped, like, to be able to just go up to people and then start asking them questions. I've always had a natural curiosity, so that was great, and I just like to observe. But and then just driving. My journalism years in Delhi were all about driving my car and just kind of documenting the changing city, which was changing a lot because it was the early years of the millennium, and Delhi was being transformed from a very kind of like sedate, slow city into a global metropolis. So that documentation was also very useful because if I hadn't been a journalist, I wouldn't have been doing things like going and writing a story on the first metro line that's just opened in the city, or going to see the first mall inauguration. So it was like, or documenting social trends and changing social trends. So that was good.
As you were writing this book, did any pieces from maybe like a past article you wrote or a past story that you were covering kind of find its way back into your author process? You're like, oh my gosh, I remember something, I want to include this in, or was anything influenced by your past experience?
That's a good question. Not specifically, but I do remember that when I was working as a journalist, and this is again, the years from say 2001 to 2006 and 2007, and there was a big narrative in Delhi about how kind of a media narrative as well, but how we needed to clean the Yamuna. the river, in Delhi, and build along its riverbank. So basically, the slum evictions that I've written about, there was this idea being created, sort of a neoliberal idea about how Delhi needs to clean itself up. And by cleaning itself up, it needs to remove all the slum dwellers and the people who work for all these middle class homes in these neighborhoods. And I remember being quite, I remember because my family lived over the river. So I used to pass it every day as we drove into the city. So there was always this idea I also had, and I think that was also influenced by my father's excitement by the idea of like, we're going to go and have jogging parks along the riverbank. So that sense that there was a middle class idea about beautifying the city that seeped into me as well, and then that was something I used in the novel.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because I think of like Sunny as a character in the beginning of the book where he's very much like idealistic, and like sometimes like some other characters will like make fun of him or being like, oh, that's like never gonna happen or something. So like I could definitely see that like translate. And then earlier when you're talking about like driving is such a big thing in the book, where like so many like large events revolve around like driving or like car crashes or like we can dive into spoilers. So I was like pausing. I was like, can I say this? But like when Sunny was like mugged and like kind of like kidnapped and taken away, like that was also like happening like kind of in a car or like in relation to a car. So like that's super interesting how your experience will shape the bigger structure, like characters, and then also like small things like, oh, we're gonna have this in a car. So yeah.
And I think it's really important to experience Delhi. It's very different if you experience Delhi as, say, someone who comes in and you're in a taxi, or you take taxis, or even you use public transport, versus if you have your own car and you drive, not even have like, because a lot of people in India have drivers. And I felt that difference with me as well. When I was in my 20s, I just drove everywhere, and I just got to know the city really intimately. It's like back alleys, where to get the best kebabs, where to get this, how to do this. Whereas now when I go to Delhi, I don't drive. My mother lives on the outskirts. It's always chaotic and just crazy traffic everywhere. So I prefer not to drive, but I feel like a real distance and a change in that relationship with the city that I used to have. I feel I used to have power over the city, and now I feel more powerless. So it's interesting that relationship has changed as I don't drive anymore.
That's such an interesting way that. Oh, sorry, you go.
No, you can go.
I was gonna say, like, that's like you brought up the idea of power, and I was like, that's such an interesting way to like frame it, of control over the metropolitan, or how familiar you are with the metropolitan it can be. Because I think of somewhere like New York, where it's very metropolitan, like subway, public transportation friendly. But I feel like if you don't use public transportation in New York, then you're like, you don't have control over the city, versus, as you were saying, in Delhi, like you have to really drive to get to know and explore all the places and be a true local.
Yeah, basically, yeah, that's the thing, because I was in New York last year and I wasn't using public transport, and it was a big problem, But whereas in Delhi now, when I go, I'm trying to use public transport, or I'm trying to use like Ubers or car share apps, and it just doesn't feel right, it feels wrong somehow. Like I feel like I need to start driving again when I go back to Delhi, but you then spend hours in traffic. Those were hours that I didn't mind so much growing up, but now it definitely feels weird. Yeah.
What's the transportation situation like in Lisbon?
Oh gosh, first of all, it's a tiny city, and it's a little bit like San Francisco. It's got hills, like we have 7 hills. So basically you end up, I walk everywhere, and it is, it's you get used to the hills, you get used to all the ups and downs, and it's really pretty, but it's small. And it's very easy to get around, especially if you don't have to make appointments. Then it's great to walk in. You can't park. Parking is a pain, so you never drive. Yeah, it's really easy compared to Delhi or anywhere in India. It's really easy.
Sounds good.
Sounds
I
like
would
a
love to
workout
visit.
every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously.
You end up having really strong legs.
Okay. Jumping back into your writing style, one thing that really stood out about the book was specifically the writing style. When we start the book, we are like jumping back and forth between timelines, and then there are also like emails and news articles, and like there are some passages where it almost feels like poetry. What inspired you to explore these different forms of writing to share the story?
Well, I think it's just I didn't really think about it as much as what felt right. So it was instinct a lot of the times, and because it's different points of view and different mental, emotional states for the characters, sometimes it just felt like I can't just do this in prose. I have to, maybe this would be better served in an email. And because we have two journalists, you have Dean and Neda, so when, especially when Dean is investigating his stories, and later on when he kind of moves away from the narrative, but you still want to see what's going on, then a news clipping seemed correct, and this in the end, I wouldn't call it poetry as much as just the frayed, fragmented consciousness of Sunny that I wanted to express. Where again, he's in such a jittery, frayed state of mind that it just felt like it was best reflected in that broken prose. Yeah. So again, a lot of instinct. Yeah.
I was listening to the book on audiobook at first, and then I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on back and forth. And I was like explaining to Alexandra this. I was like, oh, we just shifted like Sunny and stuff. And she was like, you have to pick up the physical book because you're not going to get the same experience if you're listening to it. And I like looked at it, and then I even realized, oh, even like as you were saying, like the phrase structure is different. And I was like, everything makes sense now. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that. It's great you brought that up because, Videsh has done an incredible job and in the audiobook, but how do you convey that sense that you can get that in a page where you can show all the emptiness of the page, but you can't do that in an audiobook. So that would be tricky. Do you have kind of long silences, pauses? I don't know.
Yeah.
It was still good. I was just like, I was like, it's a different experience if you read it.
And maybe you could do both. I don't know. I find that some audiobooks are really sometimes when the prose is really dense, it's harder in an audiobook, and sometimes when it's when it pivots between different characters' points of view and you're kind of like shifting a lot, then also audiobooks can be challenging.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. We're going to segue into some plot and character questions, and we did get some comments in from the chat. So someone asked you a question that since the main plot is based around mafia, gangs, crime that's happening in India, did you ever feel any anxiousness that it might cause backlash from the readers?
From readers or people? Sorry.
From anyone, yeah.
Oh, from anyone. Well, I didn't think because I have dramatized certain things, and it's not so a retelling of one particular event or something like that, and it's fictional in some way, so no, I didn't feel anxious about backlash, but I did I think living in because I moved to Lisbon about quite soon into the writing of the novel. I started in India, but then I moved here, and maybe that allowed me to be freer in my exploration of the power dynamics of the characters. I don't know if I lived. I don't think it would have been a problem anyway. But maybe because I was away from India, I was bolder. But I didn't worry about backlash.
Love that. Well, whatever happened in your process, what translated in the book was super amazing and like very interesting. It's so fun to follow. So Age of Vice follows three main characters: Ajay, who you mentioned earlier, who is a servant born into poverty; Neda, who is an upper caste educated woman; and Sunny, who is like the playboy of a crime family. As you were writing this book, which character came to you first? I know you mentioned Ajay was inspired, but was he the first character, or did you have like other characters in mind? And did writing one character bring any revelation to the light for another?
Well, it really started with the character of Sunny and then I guess Neda, but it was I have spoken about this before. I wanted to write about, say, the really ultra wealthy in Delhi in northern India, but I was I was kind of struggling because it was going to be like a Delhi Gatsby, that was an initial idea about, say, all the things that the rich get up to, and the hurt that they cause other people, but then they just get to retreat behind their wealth and their power. But then, I just it didn't feel right, just writing about, say, Sunny. So I wanted, I needed to bring in something else. I didn't know what that something else was at that point. I was, it's like writing is often like problem solving, analytical problem solving. And that's, so when I remember when I met this young boy, and he was an inspiration for the character of Ajay. And then I could combine his story with the story of the young man, the what Ajay eventually turns out, to go and work in Sunny's mansion. These young men that I used to see working in private mansions in Delhi, basically catering to your every need, small or big, intuiting what you wanted before you even knew what you wanted. And I remember just being very intrigued by these men. They always seemed so inscrutable, but also so vulnerable. And I wondered about them. And then eventually, when I could fix on the character of Ajay, that's, as I said before, that was it. That problem was solved, and I could actually really open the novel.
Would you say,
And is, of course, based on, a little bit on me, not so much. Very different family background than mine. And but I could, give her some of my experiences in journalism.
Would you say that Ajay was your favorite character to write because then he was kind of like the problem solved all of the other holes, or did you have like another favorite character that you enjoyed writing, and who was the most challenging character to write?
So, I mean, writing is very hard. It's never easy. Ajay was, I suppose, in a way, because he's a good character. I can't say I enjoyed writing him because I don't, the writing process is never enjoyable, but it's more like a compulsion. Right. But I would say that Ajay and then Eli was fun to write, because he's just at least he injects some humor into the pages, some levity, I'd say. And Sunny was the hardest, I think, because he was, especially in the latter half of the novel, he's bloated and feeling sorry for himself, but he's just so empty. And it's hard to write emptiness and you have to inhabit that emptiness and for a while as well as you write it. And that's just a horrible place to begin.
That's true.
So you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but you were a journalist in New Delhi. Neda's also a journalist, and then she was a little bit influenced by you because she covers stories across the city and country, including like investigating crime and corruption from the Wadia crime syndicate. So we're really curious to know of how much of her like motivations and how much of like, I think she's like a really impassioned character. And I guess stepping back a little bit, how much of that was influenced by your journey and your struggles? Did you ever feel like when people like Dean were kind of like pressuring her, did you feel any of those types of pressures within the industry?
No. Okay. So I don't think Neda is, she's not a very good journalist. She is someone who gets parachuted into this job where she really has she hardly has any interest in being a good journalist. She doesn't know what being a good journalist is. She gets that job because her mother makes a phone call to a friend who's an editor. And I also wanted to show the sort of nepotism that exists in the upper echelons of, a certain milieu in Indian society, like a certain kind of upper class intellectual world that she comes from. They're culturally powerful, her family, even if, and they have old money, not so much money as, they pride themselves on on the books they read, and what I learned, what did I give Nada? I gave her a certain moral ambivalence that maybe I also had in my years, at least in my early years as a journalist. And I gave her the driving that I did, drive a lot too. And apart from that, I, as a novelist, I had a sort of moral reckoning in my 30s, where I realized that I wanted to write more political novels after this gang rape of Jyoti Singh and murder on a bus in New Delhi, which sparked off nationwide protests. This was in 2012. And that made me realize that I needed to sort of change my approach to writing novels. So neither, so it didn't come earlier. As a journalist, I don't think I had any of those concerns. I was just kind of like a little bit silly and carefree. But what's interesting in Neda's character is that because she's not a very good journalist and she makes stupid choices, she gets, the entire novel's, like the main incident of the novel is basically her making this choice not to go to the police, her deciding to just go with what Sunny and tells her to do, not Sunny, but his family, what the Vadias present her with a choice. And she makes the wrong decision. And then she has to live with the consequences of her decision. That was interesting to me. And whether she would change as a result. Now we're going to see that in book 2 and 3. So, and what else? And the other stuff is that I saw lots of incredibly good journalists around me when I worked in the newsroom. And that's something I could take, like journalists like Dean. Yeah.
Yeah. Nada was such an interesting character to read, so I'm super excited to like follow her journey in the other novels and like see where she goes. But we talked about Ajay for a bit, so let's go back to him. Since the story starts off with his car accident, many assume that he would be the hero or the protagonist of the story, and you kind of said that he was like the hero. But as we continue reading, we realize there's not really like a traditional hero, since all of the characters are incredibly flawed and morally gray, and like Neda and Sunny like play a big role in the story. And like I feel like they take up a lot more space in the second half once you like find out what happens in the car accident, and like Ajay's just like not there. So did you intend to use the characters as the evolution of morality as a metaphor for the corrupt systems of power, or like how did you want to like tackle power? Because you also mentioned that you wanted to talk about power and corruption when you were thinking about the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ajay was always a way in, and I wanted to also show Sunny's family, especially the Vadias, first through the eyes of Ajay, because then they come across as a lot more sympathetic, and then later on you kind of understand who they are, and that was also interesting to see those different points of view, and I wanted specifically to take a as novelists, you have these choices you make, whether you want to go on the reflection of reality or you want to do wish fulfillment for your characters. And I wanted to reflect the reality of the world as I saw it, which means basically moving away from the most cherished, identifiable, valued characters and going towards the worst. Because men like Sunny, unfortunately, and the Vadias, they have in the real world, the money and the power to alter our realities, to alter our physical and psychic realities, and I wanted to reflect that. So it was just like, even though it's painful for so many people to move away from Ajay, because Ajay is a world that you want to get lost in, and you still have to see that, no, but actually this is the world, and I'm sorry, but that's the decision I made. I don't even think I made it as a conscious decision. My writing is very I just go, it's very instinctual. I don't outline, so maybe I should. But I do have an idea where things are going to go and what scene's going to come next. But yeah, that's it was always that Ajay will start the story and then everyone else will come in.
I really liked it because I think I was reading an interview that you did where you said a lot of Western readers really like seeing Ajay as kind of like the underdog, and then I was like, ooh, I really like seeing this underdog introduced to this new world, and then we kind of have to pivot and see like the world from Sunny's lens and the world from Netta's lens, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and it was always the intention to write a novel about the Sunnies of the world, and so and then the power they have over the Ajays. Yeah.
So towards the end, there were a lot of twists and turns, and the characters kind of spiraled towards destruction, I would say. Was the ending something you had planned from the beginning, or was it something that came to you as you were pulling together the story?
No, I didn't. I didn't plan the ending. I didn't even. I wasn't even sure if it was, because it's a trilogy now, and I'm working on the next book, and I wasn't. I remember having taking long walks and having very long baths. Wondering how to complete the story, and then realizing I had a lot more to write, and that's when the idea for the trilogy came along. So so the story is not over, and Ajay's journey is not over. So that was, basically I wanted to show, and that's what the next two books are also going to talk about, how, when Ajay has finally realized that his dependence and his on the Vadias has led to his corruption as a person and his own destruction, and that he's going to start to develop his own sense of self. So yeah, I mean, it was just didn't plan anything as much as it just happens when you write.
I'm so excited to see how it comes out in 3 books. I'm curious, when you were writing the ending, or as you were writing and you realized that it wasn't going to be a standalone, how did you know that you wanted it to be a trilogy as opposed to a duology or a longer series?
I don't know that. I don't. It was just, my agent said that you could do this as a trilogy, and we never thought of a duology. We just thought of a trilogy. And I thought at the time, okay, that sounds like a good idea. And I do, because we ended in 2008, and I want to actually see what the characters are up to in 2012, and then maybe further down the line. So then it makes sense to have it as a trilogy. And I don't know, I mean, how many books are there any duologies out there that you've read? And I don't know.
A couple.
Yeah, there are a couple.
Trilogies,
but I'm not sure.
Thing, right? I don't know. I don't know why I never conceived of it as a duology, and that is a good question. Yeah,
I feel like the duologies that I've read, the first one that comes to mind is Six of Crows and Cuckoo Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I'm not sure if you've read it, but it's young adult fantasy, and so it's also kind of fantasy, but then it almost feels like it could be one giant novel, and it's just split up into 2 parts, as opposed to a story continuing.
And that's how I think of Age of Ice as well. my intention is that at the end of it, I do want it also sold as one giant novel, if possible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's, so then you can see, so that is also some, and it just happens to be in a trilogy, not
When Alexandra finished the book, she like called me and she was like, "Is this the end? Is this a series?" And I was like, "No, it's a series. This is not the end."
Good. Yeah, I know. We probably need to get that on somewhere on the book at some point in a future edition. That this is just the first in the series. Yeah.
We're like, okay, there's more. We're gonna figure out what happens to everyone.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have to ask you, what is your favorite part about writing Age of Vice? For you as an author, was there a favorite scene or quote that you put in that you're just super proud of?
So, writing is just, I don't enjoy it, but as I said, it's something it's a compulsion. So no favorite parts as such. Sometimes, after you've solved a problem, because writing is, it's problem solving, linguistically, structurally, so much of writing is problem solving. So sometimes after you've solved something, till the next problem comes along, you have a few hours of feeling really good about yourself. That's the best time, right? And other than that, it's just mostly really painful. And sometimes when if I was writing a scene which recalled maybe something in my past, in my history, a moment that I treasured, or a moment that I'm, like there's that scene where Neda and Sunny are in Goa and they're on the bike and they're going to the beach. That was basically a journey that I had made often with my husband, and almost secret beach. And it was, so that writing it felt like reliving that moment, and that was really nice. And that moment is in the past, and it's gone, it's never going to come back. And that Goa is also gone, so that was nice. Yeah. Or feeling like briefly happy because you've solved the problem.
Yeah. I remember reading that scene and I was like, wow, this is kind of like the eye of the hurricane, even though like there's like still conflict happening, like both of them are kind of like avoiding the conflict and they're just on the beach and enjoying themselves. They want to escape. And I'm like, oh, I want to stay here. But I know realistically that's not going to happen. There are things to be confronted. But yeah.
Totally.
So Age of Vice has been published, or no, has Age of Vice been published in India? And what has the reception been like from Western audiences versus those from home?
Oh, this is so the Western gaze versus the Indian. So yes, it has been published in India by an independent publisher called Juggernaut, run by a friend of mine actually, who I've known for years. And the reception in India has been very good. It's, and so far there's been great reviews, so great reader reviews and responses, and it's been really gratifying. And I think what's different is that readers in the West, do ultimately start reading it, as Ajay's story, and then they get caught up in Ajay's world, and it becomes that hero's journey, or the journey of this young boy making it against the odds, and you're rooting for him. Whereas readers in India can look at it at the context, the politics, much more, because they intrinsically understand it, having being part of the world. So that's. And so it's easier for them to deal with the sprawlingness of the world, because that is this world they know. So that's been a really interesting difference in the responses, which I didn't expect at all. And now that it's happened, it feels like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, inevitable almost.
I'm sure they also have I don't know who will have the greater appreciation, but we all have a great appreciation for just the story, the setting, all of the little tidbits of New Delhi. So one thing we wanted to know was, for those of us who have never been to Delhi or India, and we want to visit, what's one thing you would recommend for us to do? What's one thing you wish people would knew about the city, or just about your home?
Okay, so, well, if I say, so India is such a big, sprawling, diverse country. So, I mean, talking about India is basically like talking about Europe. If I talk about the north versus the east or the south, I can't say one thing for one thing and the opposite thing will hold true for the other place. In Delhi, one thing that people maybe are surprised about when they first come is how awash it is in chicken and whiskey. Everyone in Delhi loves to drink. Not everyone. It's just a thing to say, but it is a city of whiskey, of drinkers, of alcohol, and and of meat. So and so that's the one thing. What would I recommend? I would recommend maybe having a Delhi local take you on a drive in their car, and maybe go and get some kebabs if you eat meat on a roadside. You have these guys who set up grills, and they make the best kebabs in the world. So that would be something I would recommend to people. The street food's amazing, absolutely amazing. So yeah, I mean, and then there's every part of India, every city or small town will have different things to do, and it's really about not to go with any preconceived ideas or notions, because they will get smashed when you get there.
Time for me to plan my next trip to India and then try the kebabs because they sound really good. So Age of Vice is the first of the trilogy, as we mentioned earlier, and it's being adapted for TV, which is super exciting. But do you have anything that we as readers could hopefully expect for the sequel or for the rest of the series? Like any small crumbs that you want to give us?
Well, for the in terms of the time or the characters or what? Well, for the books, I can say that Neda comes back to Delhi, and Ajay goes on a journey to discover who he really is, and we get to see the backstory of Bunty and Vicky, because they also, how did they become the feared businessmen gangsters that they are? When we meet them, so they also, so that's something that I want to write about, and I am writing about. So and the TV show is in early stages of development, so I can't, because it's not something that's completely dependent on me. I can't really say when it will be ready, but I hope it's sooner rather than later.
Oh, that's so exciting. I'm also very excited to read more about Bunty and Vicky, because I don't know, for me, I'm like, these characters, not my favorite out of everyone, but I know that they're probably I think it's just because of the way we've seen them so far. We haven't gotten to know their backstory.
Yeah.
So once we do, we'll have a deeper appreciation for who they are, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll get to see them as kids as well. And then, it's also interesting for me because I'm not so interested in the, when certain people write thrillers, they write about, why, how did this happen? Or, there's a sense, I'm not interested in what happened as much as why are these people like this? Why do they make these horrible choices? So that's always interesting, the backstories, to explore these.
So we want to ask you, what do you hope for readers to get out of your stories? And do you have any messages you want to send to your fans?
I don't have any messages, as much as I just feel like to come to the book with a very open mind, and I hate to use the word message, because that's not how I conceive of fiction. So just through it's like I'm telling a thrilling story, or propulsive. It's been called propulsive a lot, but through those, you can also there's the way different systems in India interact with each other. So, you know, you have the relationship between mafia and politics, or the relationship between or crony capitalism, and how it manifests in India how it has manifested in India in the last 20 or 30 years. And I always come back to this thing that David Simon, who created The Wire, said about how readers or audiences want ice cream, but they need broccoli. So, you know, try and give them.
That is true. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up with some final fun questions. It's like a speed round.
Okay.
What is your most anticipated 2023 release?
So I don't I don't follow the publishing industry for books in the sense. I mean, I just read what I feel like or want to at that particular point of time. It's a lot of dead people at the moment. I'm reading lots of dead writers. However, in terms of I'm gonna, you know, Succession is, for me, very exciting. It's coming out next month, or this month in March, the final season. So I'm excited for Succession. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I still need to watch it. Okay, what is a book that you would recommend to everyone?
Again, I remember I recommended the book to an old close friend years back, and she hated it. And after that, I stopped recommending books. But having said that, I think Secondhand Time by Svetlana Alexievich, which is a nonfiction book. She's Belarusian. She won the Nobel Prize a few years back, and she's written this very polyphonic book where she's collected interviews with lots of different people, talking about the breakup of the Soviet Union, end of the World War, and collected in these voices. It's very powerful, very moving. So that would be something I'd recommend to everyone to read.
Okay, I'll add that to my list. Do you have a favorite Asian food?
It's really hard. I love. When you say Asian, do you mean South Asian, Southeast Asian? You know,
the whole Asian,
No.
South Asian, Southeast Asian, East Asia. I know that makes it harder. West Asia.
Okay, so if I'm in Chiang Mai, it's going to be like northern Thai food. If I'm in North India, in a particular state in Himachal, it's going to be curry chawal. I like bitter umami flavors. So I love food that's Indian, and then Thai, northern Thai, followed by Korean and Japanese. Though I haven't been to Korea or Japan, so I need to, obviously I like to go to places and then eat everything. And then followed by Mexican. Least favorite would be European and American, like traditional American, right? And as Asians, I guess you guys can understand that, right? Yeah, I don't know.
But you live in Lisbon.
Yeah, I know, which is why I'm telling you. I just bitter, spicy flavors. So you can't, European food isn't that. So
yeah, very true.
Definitely.
Okay.
I do enjoy the wine here, though, I have to say. It's just some of the best wine in the world. So. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with us. We had a really great time and loved getting to know more about your thought process and just the thinking and getting to know you, the mastermind behind the book. Thank you, everyone who's watching. We're really excited for you guys to read our March book of the month as well, which is Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. And Deepti, if you have any last final words you'd like to share, we're very grateful for your time today.
Oh no, I'm just it was a fun afternoon. Thank you. I'm glad you guys. I hate to use the word enjoyed, because I'm not sure you can enjoy the book. You can, you can get immersed in the book for sure. So yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoyed the book. Anyway, okay, yeah, this was fun.
Yay.
And we'll keep an eye out for the sequel.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Great.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.